Hey, we are back on the Scaling Secrets podcast with Todd Schmick, who is a seasoned expert with over 30 years of experience in time management and stress reduction. Now, Todd is the founder of Priority Management SW, and Todd has helped many people just like you, individuals and organizations, achieve better balance and productivity. So, we are going to learn some practical tips, some key strategies, how to handle stress, maintain a sense of calm, and so much more, all the above. So, Todd, glad to speaking with you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for having me, Robert. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And so we gave a little bit of an intro, a little bit of a hype
Yeah.
up, but it's in your own words, what's your own focus and passion?
Well, as you mentioned there, I've been fortunate to do what I've been doing for over 30 years. And if it's taught me anything, and that's this, you can't manage time. And even though that is the genre that we're in and that we've worked with people and individuals and companies globally, it's a misnomer to think that you can actually manage time. Now we know that, and there's all kinds of bestsellers out there and books and talking about this concept of time management. But when you can flip it and understand that it's really about self-management, if we could manage time, Robert, we'd slow it down, we'd speed it up, we'd collect it, we'd keep it, we'd bank it away. We would actually manage it just like we do, let's say, with our money. We'd manage that process, but time we can't. So it's about making that switch up here, that it's about self-management. And if we then take the pressure off managing that clock and managing what we can ourselves, then all of a sudden we start to find this equilibrium, or if you will, balance.
I love it. And I think you're so right that there's always these attempts to manage time, but it's so unpredictable. Life throws us at all these unexpected, events. And what you're making me think of is, when I was in like late 20s, early 30s, I didn't know myself, my mind, my body. And as I get older and wiser, I'm thinking like, okay, like I know or have a guesstimate that this task will take me 2 hours or like three 30-minute sessions. I feel like I know myself a little bit better, but I still, I feel like we still need to try, right? Like we can't just say like, oh, well, there's no possible way to manage time. It's like, it seems like all these bestsellers are like, well, here's a,
Right.
a plan or here's an approach we're trying to take. So like, we're still making an effort, right?
Absolutely. And so thus the name priority management. I understand that there is a hierarchy. There is these priorities that we have to look at, and if we follow some form of a process to manage that, if you will, those priorities, that then a byproduct, it manifests into balance. So a couple takeaways on that. The first thing is, quick, fast takeaway is you've got to let volume go. Again, we hear this and we understand this. I was just having dinner with some dear friends a couple nights ago, and she was completely stressed out. She gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she's a high level producer. And I just asked her to take a breath, and I said, listen, you're never going to get it all done. And you could almost feel this moment of like angst where it was like, no, but you don't understand. I've got to get it all done. I was like, but you're never going to get it all done. So as we start to accumulate checks on our to-do list, there's this sense, and it's been scientifically proven, right, that when we do a check mark on our to-do list, we're getting some dopamine released in our brain. It feels really good to the point where we become addicted to that, right? So now it's about how many things do I check off because I start feeling good. But volume will always get you into trouble because you're never going to be done. It's called job security. It's called life, right? And so there's always more to do. Well, simple to talk about, but to actually put into implementation and to live it, it's hard because we've been told volume, check things off that list, get it done. Don't put things off today don't put things off today that you can do tomorrow. Or, I got that backwards. Don't put things up. I don't even know how to say it because I don't live it.
Right.
Right. So we have all these little catchphrases, but really what it's about is understanding that, wait a minute, doing the right things at the right time. Again, not telling you any secrets here. We all know that. But to live that is difficult because it's real easy in today's 21st century with all the technology that we have and the fire hose of information coming at us is to just bounce to the very next thing. And in my 30 years of doing this, working with people and organizations, it's probably needed now more than ever. It's this sense of finding balance. And one of the little taglines I sent you there was, balance isn't static. It isn't like we're trying to find some perfect little Zen moment and then maintain that. I quote Einstein because he's got a lot of good ones out there, but he said, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep balance, you must keep moving. But a lot of people understand or think or interpret the word moving as doing. And so if I'm busy and I'm doing things, then I must maybe be achieving. When in fact, Robert, it's really almost the opposite. It's almost about throttling down and slowing down, and which is not trying to sell anything, but the concept is very tough in today's world of slowing down to speed up. That just doesn't make sense in today's world. It's all about how fast, how quick. 5G's got to be better than 4G, and 6G is going to be even better than that. So go, 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 go until when? We drop? Well, what's that outcome?
If we're not careful.
Right, exactly. And you see it. And you see it in the corporate world. You see it in the professional, in the personal world, where people are just, they're striving to try to find this little moment to be able to find some balance. And, that's what I think we do. I do. We've been doing really well.
Well, let's get there, right? Let's figure out what you do to help us get to this balance, because some of this seems to be counterintuitive, but in a good way, right? It's like instead of having all this activity, you kind of prioritize and you take a rest and you kind of do things more strategically. And you're so right that when you write down the whole big long to-do list, then it's tempting to say, oh, I'll do all the little stuff. But if you do all this little insignificant stuff, then you end up like tricking yourself, fooling yourself. And I drive myself crazy with all the metaphors, because especially with time management, there's no limit to it, right? And like I saw something the other day that said, like, well, let's say there's your battery, and they say when your battery, like a lot of people wait until the batteries are red to take a break, but you should really wait till your battery is at yellow. That way you don't like completely empty yourself out. And so like, what's the way forward here? Like if someone says like, oh, I'm so busy, I need to get it all done. And you say, well, slow down and speed up. Like, how do we get there? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I was just on an airplane not too long ago, and sitting beside me, the person there was found out a little bit of what I do and how I do it and what we do and why we do it. And so they asked me this question, Robert. They said, so if you had to boil it down, a couple key points, what would you tell me so that I could be, quote unquote, find balance, increase my productivity, reduce stress? If you could just bundle that up into a quick little catchphrase, because that's the world that we live in, right? We want it now. And I said this, make sure you get a good night's rest. Now they took a pause back and they stopped. And they went, well, yeah, come on. What tool should I use? What app should I use? What planner should I use? And we went through all this kind of content. And I said, nope, make sure you get a good night's rest. Now, if you start from that level and work backwards, then you're able to kind of figure out where this person is, where they are on this level, if you will, of balance, right? So they said, well, explain to me. I said, well, let's just take this from this perspective. If you take two people and they have the same duties tomorrow, same responsibilities and the same scenario, they have a family, they don't have a family, they have whatever it is, they have a commute, they don't have a commute, but you make them the identical person and they have the same responsibilities to do tomorrow, both personally and professionally. Answer me this question. The person that gets good 8 hours sound rest, sleep, versus the person that's up at 4, too much caffeine, too many monsters, too many whatever to stimulate, to keep it going, which person is going to be more productive tomorrow? And you would say what, Robert? Right?
Good night's rest. Yeah.
Good night's rest. So it's more of a hobby, but it's something I study, I listen to, I read about the power of sleep. So, and it's being eroded, right? It's being destroyed in today's world because it's really hard to turn things off, right? Does your phone come into the bedroom? Do you have a TV in the bedroom? Do you have an iPad in the bedroom. What's the last thing you see? And everybody understands this and knows this, that you shouldn't see that blue light for maybe up to 90 minutes before you go to try to sleep, right? And so this concept of go, 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 and sometimes we get enamored by hearing people, I only need 4 hours. Listen, that's a minority group out there. The body is built for 8 hours in general, right? So rule number one, what's your sleep pattern? How well are you sleeping? If you aren't sleeping, that's where I'd start. Why? What are you doing that's hindering the sleep pattern? And by the way, you got decades of creating this kind of environment. So it's not going to happen overnight. You have got to start to look at what can I do? What are the tactical things I can start to do to start to impact it? It's no different than changing your diet or changing your workout regimen or whatever the case may be. It doesn't happen overnight, but that's the first place I like people to look at is what kind of sleep pattern are you getting? Because very quickly you can find out then what kind of productivity they're experiencing the next day. Right? Because now they need the stimulants, the caffeine, whatever the case may be to keep them going. And it just starts to kind of feed this negative self-fulfilling prophecy. So number one, just take a quick audit of your sleep behavior and patterns.
Very
Number
nice.
two,
Yeah. So yeah, so just to digest this. So let's get good sleep. And then you say number two, now that we have a good sleep, then what?
All right. So let's wake up to a plan. Right? And, people who help plan the battle don't battle the plan. And we use that when we look at a group and we're trying to collaborate. So we want to get people's input, but also you can do that individually for yourself, right? So look at yourself as this person. And if I'm involved in the planning process, then I won't fight that planning process. Well, when does that planning process start? Well, I can tell you in the tens of thousands of people in the 33 years I've been doing this, less than 10% of the people we work with wake up with an actual formalized plan. The plan is wake up and go. So it is literally the cup of coffee, making it to the Zoom call 1 minute before, constantly reading emails, just trying to survive, using phrases like, I can't wait till 5 o'clock rolls around, 6 o'clock, you change the clock, 7 o'clock, can't wait till that time rolls around where most people are done. I can now start to do my work. Why weren't you able to do your work during the day? Well, because I was, always available. And so what happens is if they don't wake up with this plan, they can't sleep. Because in the back of their mind, they know they can't sleep because they don't have a plan. So it fights each other. Wait a minute. I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I know what time the alarm's going off. I understand what my commute. One of the quickest ways to find balance is just being on time, Robert. I live on a very busy road. And I see these people on the road, and you can see the people that are out of balance because they're upset that I'm doing the speed limit. They're upset that I didn't run the yellow. They're upset and they're doing this while they're trying to do that, while they're trying to do this, because there wasn't any time to do that before they got to where they need to get to, right? Well, the person that's on time and prepared, calm, cool, collect, right? So it starts with getting a good night's rest, waking up to a really good proactive plan, having a meeting with yourself. You can probably imagine the pushback we get where we ask people to say, I want you to spend 5 to 15 minutes every morning having a formalized meeting with yourself every morning. Sounds so simple, right? But it's so easy also to cancel that meeting because look at the fire hose of information that's coming in. And that just creates this domino effect. So invest that 5-10 minutes in the morning working on that plan. And then you have to do a post one. You got to do one at the end of the day. And when you do that post plan at the end of the day, which is beginning to do the proactive plan for the next day, you also then get to be able to do this. And that is stop. Shut it down and become that other person other than that professional person. And in the 30 years, and I've got a beautiful wife of 33 years and two wonderful children that are young adults now. Um, I I want those days back when I say when they were young, and I know I can't have those days back, but I also have no regrets because I was there. I was present. I got on the floor and played Legos. I didn't miss my son's volleyball or my daughter's tennis. Nobody will ever say this when it's on that bed. It says, I wish I would have worked harder and longer. So to do something about that now starts with good night's rest, waking up to a proactive plan, being able to shut it down, having that meeting with yourself, and then understanding it's not about volume. Doing less is more. And that's tough in today's world where it's all about the more you do, you must be more productive.
Very nice. So you've given us so much to think about so far. And so it seems like a lot of this comes down to habits and boundaries, right?
Yes.
Know how well you sleep, know when to sleep, have these kind of rules for yourself, and limit the blue light, as you said, wake up to a plan, have the formalized meeting. And, a lot of what you said there are things like I didn't really implement until a few years ago because I had to. I had a son, and then suddenly now there's responsibilities, right? Now you have to
Right.
drive the kid to school, and I was kind of laughing on the inside when I can relate to a lot of what you said of like when he has to be at school probably at 8:30 at the latest. And there was only like one morning when we were anywhere close to being late. Like usually we're at the door at like 7:52,
Right.
even though it only takes like 15 minutes to get there. But I'm like, hey, I know things will go wrong. I might hit every red light, might get cut off in traffic. And so I'm just like, well, if I have this little bit of margin of, an extra 10, 15 minutes, then I don't have to be so stressed out. And like you were saying, you see all the other drivers, right? People running the red lights and just like being so like riding
Right.
your bumper. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Doesn't.
And it seems like it's more than a fair trade, right? Because they're thinking like, oh, if I'm squeezing in every last text message or every last minute, but it's like at the cost of what? To be so
Right.
stressed out, to be using all this brain power that you could instead be using for your creativity. And so you mentioned in there about this 5 to 15 minute formalized meeting with yourself, and I find that like sort of interesting. And so what's that about? Like, what's the structure or process there?
Yeah. So the first thing is you physically need to see it on your calendar. So it can't be this phantom hypothetical, oh yeah, I'm going to have this meeting with myself where, I'm having a cup of coffee and I'm checking the stock prices and I'm watching the news and I'm making a peanut butter sandwich for the kids to go to school, right? No, it's got to be actually documented of when you're going to have this. Now, we are creatures of habit, right? So most of us are able to block out that time, the same time every morning. So just start to creating that pattern that you pick the time, but from 7:45 to 8 o'clock, I meet with myself. And that means no phones, no emails, and looking at your day and understanding what are your commitments from a fixed standpoint and what are your commitments from a flexible standpoint. So all of our fixed commitments are, I have 3 calls today, set times. One is with you right now, 2 other coaching calls later on today. So those are my fixed appointments, right? Then I have this list of flexible work that I've got to do, the to-dos, if you will, in our lives, right? So during this 15-minute meeting with myself, first is I've got to understand what are all of my fixed appointments and what do I need to do to be prepared for those fixed appointments? Do I need to commute? What time do I need to leave? Listen, good, even though I don't like this phrase, and I'll change it in a moment here, but good time managers, let's change that. Good self-managers, right? Good self-managers understand that they should pretty much double all their expectations. Now, what does that create? It's one of the oldest hacks out there in the 30 years I've been doing this. So, Robert, if you know it takes 15 minutes to get was it your son, did you say? Yeah,
Yes.
your son to school. All right. If you know it takes 15 minutes, but you block out 30 minutes. Now you can understand, and we could just use this as a metaphor here, but you can understand the first thing people say is, you don't understand. I don't have that extra 15 minutes. That's not true. You have created an environment where you don't have any buffer time. There is no flex time. All right. So You schedule 30 minutes. So you are now this calm, cool, collect dad that can play the music, have a conversation with your son, and hit a red light, and there's no stress. Your stress doesn't go up, your heart rate doesn't go, because you're okay, because you've planned for the chaos, right?
Right.
So you double everything. So you also then look at those fixed appointments that you have and you say, what do I have to do to be prepared? Is it a drive? Is it create some notes? Is it to have all my documentation in the right place? It is astounding in today's world that people now use this phrase, because we do probably 70% of what we do now is through Zoom and go-to meetings and things like that. But it's astounding, Robert, how many times we hear this phrase where people say this, cameras off, and people say this, sorry, here's the phrase, I'm not camera ready. And I'm like, what does it take in today's world to be camera ready? 30 seconds? 45 seconds? Put a shirt on? Comb the hair, brush the teeth, right? I'm not camera ready, so click. It's like, okay, that's fascinating, right? So we have that meeting with ourselves. We know what those fixed appointments are. We want to be camera ready. We double our time estimations. By the way, if it only takes you 15 minutes to get your son to school, you just found 15 minutes.
Right.
See, and you found 15 minutes. Now, what you can do? You can take a new route home. I've always wanted to take that other way home and drive over that ridge and look over there and see what that area looks like. Never time to do that when you throw the kid out, barely makes it, sorry about the tardiness, and then rushing back home to get ready for that Zoom call, not camera ready, right? Now you've actually banked time away, not because the clock changed, you changed. So you have that meeting with yourself. You know what your fixed commitments are. Then you take a look at all your flexible workload. And the first thing you do is you cut it down by 80%. Real simple math, if you have 100 things on your list today that you think you need to start, do, begin, you cut that down to 20%. And this is tough love. And I sit with people at their desks and we look at a list of 100 items and I force them to cut out 80%. They're like, no, I should do this. I'm like, you've been saying you should have done this for 10 weeks, 10 years, but you've never done it. So obviously you can postpone it. There's a phrase I love to use. It's called proper procrastination. It allows you to understand that I've got to take this volume and I have to cook this down and say, okay, 20%. And that's as good as it's ever going to get, if you can even get to that. 80% off. And imagine this now. It's now 8 o'clock in the morning. You've had a 15-minute appointment with yourself. You know where you're going, how you're going to get there, how you're going to be prepared for all your fixed commitments. You now take in your flexible work list, and you've cooked that down to this 20%. You've prioritized that. We all know the tricks. Highs and lows, ones and twos, A's and B's. Keep in mind, this is a fluid environment because the next email that comes in is going to change that. That's why you have to have a process, because if you don't have a process, then all you do is just wait for the next change. You know you're in trouble, Robert, when you're working on the most current email. If you're working on the most current email that just came into your inbox, you're out of control. Because you didn't even know this email was going to come in 30 seconds ago, and now you're working on it. Obviously, you did not have a plan of attack. So now it's 8 o'clock. This doesn't create this kumbaya Zen world. What it creates now is you have the ability to adapt. You have the ability to make the appropriate changes, because balance is not static. Just because you have this game plan doesn't mean it's all going to go according to plan. What happens now is when the curveball comes at you, you're actually able to make the appropriate adjustments to still be at a high level producer, both personally and professionally. And you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it to a point to where it becomes consciously or unconsciously competent. You're so good at it, you don't even know you're doing it. Most of us are at that level of unconsciously incompetent. We don't even see what it is we're doing that's actually hindering our quote unquote balance.
I love this. All of this is great. And I imagine that we're maybe on the right track with some of these elements, right? We're doing some of these things correctly accidentally, but we could be doing more. And it seems like this just leads to living like a more like clean lifestyle and clean business, right? Just without the clutter, without the mess. And by cutting out down to 20% and being more prepared, it's like, well, don't worry, that empty space will get filled up with something, but now you'll be more
Absolutely.
in control of it. And you're just making me like realize a lot of things. Like even like when we sit down for a podcast, I like pull open the bio, pull open the LinkedIn page, pull open the website just to have sort of all these things ready. And
Right.
like there's something to that, right? There's something to like just knowing what you'll set up, knowing what your steps are. And this is all helpful to think about. And you're making me realize that I do kind of do like a written kind of like task
Yeah.
list, but I don't do it as consistently as I know I should, right? I don't
Mhm.
do it daily. So having like this morning meeting, that's going to be the way to do it. And
Right.
so this is the Scaling Secrets podcast. And also on a podcast, it's fun to work in like a story of some kind. So do you have like with all these people and businesses you've helped, do you have a fun scaling story to share with us so that way we can kind of experience the magic of the self-management concept?
Hmm. Story. Yeah. You're able. I remember this one particular gentleman came up to a workshop, and he came up to me, and he in a and we had broken some items down. I'm just thinking about this person, but we broke down what this person needed to do. So we were in this group setting, and it was a large group, and people were going through this. And this gentleman came up to me at one of the breaks, and he said, I'm struggling. I'm struggling, and what you're saying right now is resonating with me. And that's the good news. The bad news is I'm struggling. And we asked a little bit. I asked a few more, like, what part are you struggling with? He says, I don't think I'm being the father, the husband, the man that I should be from a personal standpoint because my job is so demanding. And he said, based on what we talked about in this class, he said, I know how if I continue to do this, how the story is going to end. And that's scary, frightful, sad. But I don't know how to break it, how to stop it, right? I mean, can you believe, Robert, that it's 2024, April 18th? It's like how fast this goes. And all I suggested to him was this: start small and start simple. Make sure that you do something that's useful for you first. If you don't put your mask on first, it doesn't matter if you have a family of 4 or 40 beside you. You don't do yourself any good by trying to put that mask on others. And in today's world, we sometimes feel that's selfish. We feel like, well, I don't know if I should be doing that. But take care of yourself first. Putting that mask on, I was on the airlines. They're like, the mask drops, put yours on first, and then put it on your family second. Take care of yourself first, because then you start to find balance, and then you're able to actually be that person you want to be. And you'll start to find these spaces, and you'll start to find how much energy we waste, and we don't even realize it, right? And what we don't want to have happen is at the end of the day, the week, the month, our life to go, I could have done better. Start now. Start by making those incremental little steps, looking at your sleep, looking at your planning, looking at your fixed, flexible work, having that meeting with yourself. Just start doing a little bit every day. And the way the story ended was I did a follow-up session with this gentleman about 60 days later. And he said, I now understand what you mean by this. I'm now consciously incompetent. And what he said was, and here's the close, he said, I'm not there yet, but I'm aware of what I need to do to move in that direction. And he goes, and that's a huge win, because I was in the clouds, the mist, if you will. Now I'm aware. I still have work to do, but I'm consciously aware of what I need to do. And I believe, Robert, that's as good as it's ever going to get.
I agree. That's a helpful story. Just making those first small steps and knowing where you're going wrong and knowing what you need to work on. And especially like this idea here of the flexible and the inflexible appointments on the calendar. Like I've especially had awareness of that in the past year or so, because it's so easy to say like, oh, I'm so busy
Right.
today and I need to clear my schedule. I need to focus on this. And sometimes it's like, well, you might have a more I keep using this word busy, but like you might have a more
Yeah.
filled up day by being like, well, I don't know if I have this half an hour to make this meeting or this appointment, but sometimes just make it to your appointments and then figure out what else can go by the wayside. And I imagine that if someone is really this stressed out and this overwhelmed, then they need to make a change. Like you've said a few times, like you can't keep going this way because it will lead to an early death or maybe just a stressed out life. And you look back and say like, I shouldn't have sweat the small stuff as
Right.
much as I did. And if we're aware of this, then that's already a good sign, right? Even though we
Exactly.
might not think it, because it means like we're in some form on the path, on the trajectory. But what we need is some thinking outside of ourselves, right? Because our current thinking and our current activities have led us to this point. We need some new actions. And so it can help to have a guide or a mentor such as yourself to kind of break us out of our own thinking. And some things are
Yeah.
things that we've heard but haven't taken seriously, and some is new information. So how can someone take that step? How can they contact you? How do they know if they're a right fit? How can you help?
Yeah. And so practice, and we've been duped on this phrase, practice makes progress. This whole idea of perfection, right? And so think how that becomes so stifling, right? So I've got to become perfect in whatever it is you want to, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a coworker, as a volunteer. So I have to become perfect. Well, that immediately just makes you want to just stop, because it's like nobody's perfect, right? It's not. So if we can just shift that, just like we shift the phrase time management to self-management, if we can shift that from practice makes progress. And that's all we're looking for. We're just looking for, are you moving forward? And it's okay to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's still progress, right? And then when it becomes stagnant and there's just no progress, or we're going in the wrong direction, yeah, that's when you might need additional help or resources. So to contact us, my email address, is that what you want? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Any contact details are okay. Have
Yeah.
at it.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Great. So it's priority management. Well, excuse me. We'll back up. So it's Todd's, TODD, like Sam. So Todd's at prioritymanagement.com. Once more time. TODDS. My name again is Todd Kevin Schmick. So Todd's at prioritymanagement.com. And we have a host of things, and what we different ways of working with people. It can be individually, some life coaching. We do workshops, seminars, things of that nature. But before we do anything, we just have a conversation to see if anything that we have to offer might help you in that, if you will, progression, so that you're moving in the right directions. And we're the first ones to know that if what we do doesn't help you, we understand that. But if what we do can assist you, then we'd love to have a conversation with you. So that's the easiest way to contact us.
Well, great. And do you have any guidance as far as what someone should say in that email? Should they say to Todd S at prioritymanagement.com, my problem is this. I'd like to have a conversation about that. Like, how do we give them an easy template? That way they don't get stuck about what even to say.
Yeah. They could just say, hey, I was on the podcast. I'd love to have some more conversations, or find out what else you do. Something that's that simple, and we'll respond. We'll respond to them. So if they want to get specific on a particular area, they're fine. If they want to keep it very generic and just to make sure that you know who we are, then we can send them all of our information so they can kind of vet us out and make sure we are who we are. But yeah, just say that they listened to this podcast and they found some of the information interesting, thought provoking, and then make it real simple. We'll just reach out and have a quick conversation.
Well, great. And that takes 15 seconds to send an email like that, todds
Right.
prioritymanagement.com. Tell them that you heard of Todd on the Scaling Secrets podcast and say, I want to have that conversation. And then the ball will be in Todd's court to
Absolutely.
figure out where you can get the help that you need and to change your lifestyle, change your timeline, get rid of the stress, figure out the self-management thing, and be at peace with the balance you find, and know that you can't get it all done, but practice does make progress. So Todd S at prioritymanagement.com. And as we wrap up our conversation here, Todd, I always like to get one last little soundbite, right? For the socials, for the TikToks, for the reels. So does anything soundbitey come to mind if I ask you for a quote or lesson that you think might really help us out?
Would have put me on the spot. Yeah. I'll give you one. So I did a pause right there on purpose. And in today's world where there is constant noise, internally, externally, there is a moment when on an environment like this, the speaker does this pause. And they're like, is he frozen? And there's this moment of just silence and this pause. We don't get enough of them. It's okay. It's needed more so now than ever to pause. Listen to your breath. I'll ask people to take 30 seconds just to be quiet. And it's fascinating in today's world. They can't do it. I live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I was on the beach yesterday, and 8 out of 9 people were on their phones. And this sunset was, it was phenomenal. So it's just take a moment to pause, and you'll find that balance because it's in you. We just got to let it surface.
Very inspiring. Take that moment to pause, but make sure you do it right after emailing Todd S at prioritymanagement.com, and you'll be glad that you did. And thank you very much, Todd, for showing up and giving us just all these lessons, all these insights about what we can and should be doing. I really appreciate you.
Robert, thank you for taking the time and for reaching out. I appreciate your time as well. And aloha to everybody else.